Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. This is Kyle coming at you solo for today's intro. Keaton couldn't make it on tonight. I figured I'd just hop on, introduce this episode, and we're going to get right into the podcast. It's a little bit longer today. Keaton and I interviewed Jared Larsen. He is a marketing manager at OnX Maps, and he shares a little bit about his background, some of his guide stories from guiding in Alaska, some of his hunting experiences, and how he likes to get away and find some little blue lines and fly fishing in Montana. He also talks a little bit about how he uses OnX Maps and some of the features available with that software. Both Keaton and I use OnX for our own hunting and fishing and outdoor recreation. So we kind of talk about that. Super fun podcast. It is a little bit longer. I know you guys are going to like it. Some great stories to be told. Jared even talks a little bit about some of his bear encounters. So kind of keeps you on your toes. Great podcast. Before we get into it, I do want to mention our partners, Heather's Choice. If you use the Young Guides 15 at checkout, you can get 15% off your purchase. And our partner at Lucky Bug Lures, again, use the promo code the Young Guides 15 at checkout and get 15% off your purchase at Lucky Bug Lures. So, without further ado, let's hop right into today's episode with Jared Larsen of OnX Maps. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. Today we have on a special guest. We have on Jared Larsen. He is a marketing manager at OnX Maps, and he's had some super cool adventures all over the place, hunting and fishing related. Super cool guy. We thought we'd have him on to kind of talk about himself, what he does in the outdoor industry, and kind of where he got to where he's at today. So without further ado, welcome on to the podcast, Jared.
Hey, I appreciate it, Kyle and Keaton, for having me on. Looking forward to chatting today, and shooting the bull about guiding and hunting, fishing, all the good things that bring us outside and get us doing what we love to do.
Awesome.
Sure.
Well, let's get rolling in it. Can you tell us about your background, just about you?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin. My whole family was into the outdoor scene, so I was introduced to it super early on. And then I went to Iowa State purely to get resident deer tags in college. And I just chose a degree in marketing because I was like, that's, something general. I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. And that actually panned out pretty well for me. Now I'm a whitetail marketing manager at OnX, for lack of a better term, and work with all of our whitetail partners and, coordinate the internal marketing communications, if you will, there with our team. And, that certainly doesn't limit me to only hunting whitetails. I try to make it up to Alaska, at least to fish or potentially hunt once a year. And certainly I live in Missoula, Montana, so do a number of weekends in the elk woods and chasing mule deer. But at the end of the day, if I only could hunt one thing, it'd probably be whitetails.
Nice. Can you kind of go back and tell us a little bit about, like, when did you start hunting, like about your lifestyle back home and how that was all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up with a couple siblings, an older brother and an older sister. And then mom and dad. My dad, he drug us kids out pretty much as soon as we were able to. I mean, there's pictures of me, in a backpack with him, fully camoed up with his bow. Like, he'd take me like deer hunting when I was, I don't know, like 3 or something, younger than it made any sense, just to get me out there. Did the same with, my brother and sister. There's some hilarious pictures of us like playing with, deer hooves or a dead squirrel or, whatever came home that day. And so just grew up in it, did a lot of waterfowling and whitetail hunting, really primarily growing up, and then turkey hunting in the spring. And then my old man and his brothers would travel west, pretty much once a year. They'd go on a moose hunt in Canada or an elk hunt or a mule deer hunt or do something. And always an archery hunt. And so I kind of grew up just doing that. Once I got into high school, started going out west with them and getting my ass kicked by the mountains. I remember I missed a bull on my first elk hunt. It was like the last day, just a chip shot, like 30 yards. This little 5x5 comes screaming in, and I sailed that arrow like a good 6 inches over his back. Like it wasn't even close. But that's all part of the fun is, yeah, I was able to grow up in a family that everyone went out there and did it. And it was, built lifetime bonds, and, we still go out and try to get together annually and, I at least see a bunch of my family on one core hunt.
That's awesome.
That's cool. What about your fishing background? I know you do quite a bit of that. Were you doing that back home too?
Yeah, for sure. So, I've really only talked about hunting up to this point, but I definitely spend a fair amount of time fishing. I'd say in the last 2 years, it's maybe taken a little bit of a back seat, just because it's really hard to fish in the fall. I don't know about you guys. I mean, are you guys fall fishermen?
Usually, well, now we're guiding. I'm guiding, and like all last fall, I didn't really fish much in the fall. I was out rowing people,
Doing it. Yeah.
on fish. And Kyle, I don't know about Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's up here. It's September. It's kind of your last month, and so that's when you're trying to get clients out. And I actually got Giardia like the first week of September, so that kind of put me out for a whole week this year. So I made it kind of rough this fall.
Yeah, Giardia, that's never fun. But yeah, so anyhow, I had just spent too much time hunting to fish in the fall, but I would say, late May, early June through August are pretty dedicated to the mountain rivers. These last couple of years, I've really, there's so much water in Western Montana and Idaho, like so much water. And I really don't enjoy fishing from a boat nearly as much as I do like hiking in and walking and wading. And so that's really what I've done the last couple of years is just hoofing in, anywhere from a mile or 2 miles, as far as Buddy and I did like 14 miles in on a particular river. I actually got my parents to come out, and we flew into the Frank Church with a little airplane and got dumped off on a tributary of the North Fork of the Salmon there. So that's kind of been like my last couple of years, and really like I really love West Slope cuts. I mean, they're just always hungry, and they're such beautiful fish. And Alaska ruined me on the rainbows. And so like I still have a love for rainbows, right? But like catching them in Montana just feels I don't know, feels just wrong from spending a fair amount of time in Alaska. So I try to just pick out cuts and then where legal, because it is not legal in Montana. But often I'll go to Idaho and search for some bull trout. I just think, again, from Alaska, I'm sure you guys have caught your fair share of dollies. And I don't know, those fish are just so rad. And so that's kind of where my love for bull trout spawned. And so, yeah, that's kind of my fishing MO. And I don't know if we want to get into some shitty guide stories now or later, you guys tell me.
What I got a question for you. You talked about you're from Wisconsin, right? Do you do much ice fishing or anything back home? I have to ask. It's just like you hear Wisconsin people and they're like, oh, we're out on the ice today, huh?
Yeah, ice fishing, man. So I definitely grew up like, hucking rapalas at largemouths, right? Like, and I still enjoy that shit, but like it's not nearly as enjoyable as the Western United States vibe of fishing, in my opinion. But ice fishing, I hate ice fishing personally. Like I will do it for the camaraderie, or if like there's a crew like, hey, let's go ice fishing for the day. But if somebody was like, hey, ice fishing trip 3 days, I'd be like, fuck no, not like you can pay me to go do that. Maybe in a younger day where I didn't get so hungover after drinking like, a dozen beers. But yeah, it's not really for me. Have you guys ice fished?
I haven't really had a lot of interest in it, just because it's like getting in all this warm gear and you're using these little rods and you're just like jigging in a small hole that big in the ice. Just there's something about it that I'm like, I'll let you guys do it. More fish for you.
Yeah, I did it back home a long time ago in Washington, and I haven't really done it since. I know there's a lot of stuff up here, and we're kind of just getting into like the good ice. So I'm trying to find somebody to take me out because I don't know what I'm doing. I want somebody to take me out, kind of show me the ropes, tell me what I need to get, what I need to do. So
ice fishing gets so high tech, man. I mean, like, but those, those fish locators, fishing without one of those things on the ice just seems foolish unless you really know that particular lake or what have you. But I mean, yeah, the guys that I work with, there's a few guys at the office that love to do it. Really, everyone in my family loves ice fishing. I was just like, you guys are nuts. Like, go have at it. I'll sit on the couch and watch if that's what my options are. But I definitely know some guys over by like Valdez that catch some giant lake trout through the ice. And there's a pond not too far from home here. They put just brood stock trout in this pond. And there was a year where I went ice fishing a couple times. And I caught like a 29-inch rainbow trout out of this pond, or maybe it was 28. I don't know. Freaking huge. I mean, it was just like a broodstock, gross, ugly fish, but it was a pretty awesome fight on a little, 2-foot rod. But that's the last time I've been ice fishing.
Nice.
That's a big fish. That'd be sweet.
I don't want it to seem like we're like completely dissing, because I think ice fishing is its own like art and skill. And I think the people that really do it, it's just like any type of fish, right? Like you got to figure it out. You got to know what to need and what to do and all that. So we're not going hammering on ice fishing right now. We're just saying it's not for us, I just want to put that out there.
I'll take credit for hammering on ice fishing. I respect what you guys are doing, and stay out there and stay off the ski mountain and wherever else I might be. But no, ice fishing, I mean, it's hard to beat a meal of crappies if you pull a limited panfish out of a hole. That's good eating.
Well, the thing, like up here, in Washington, our crappie are only like a couple inches long from the ones that I've caught here. So it's like you take a knife to that, you got about a fillet that's like 3 inches long. I haven't found the
crappie fishing out there, huh?
Yeah, not very good. It's crappie.
Nice pun there. I caught that, Kyle.
Yeah, no, it's there's surprisingly some good warm water fishing out in Washington. Like there was walleyes and like an average size walleye out here is like 14 to 18 inches, and we get walleye over 20. I think my biggest walleye was like 24 or something like that. And
that's
9.5 pounds.
Very solid walleye.
Yeah.
Mostly on like the western part of the state, or are you in like central?
Back home, that was in like mostly in eastern Washington. So
eastern, okay.
Yeah, the Columbia River, a lot of those reservoirs like Lake Roosevelt, Banks Lake, like a lot of those have pretty good walleye fisheries. And the Columbia, I think for bass and walleye in some spots, there's like no limits just because of they eat all the salmon and stuff. So we've got pretty big population.
Interesting. Yeah, the Columbia is a daunting piece of water. I wouldn't even begin to know how to fish that thing.
Yeah, it is massive. It is
huge.
Yeah.
And then you got guys on the Columbia that have figured out walleye or pike minnows, or even like I've heard of people having great days on like trout fishing. They find spots along the cliffs or indicator fishing or throwing streamers or whatever they do. But I'm the same with you. Like that's a lot of water to cover, especially since it goes from like Oregon all the way up to what is it, Canada, goes through Washington down
British Columbia.
Yeah. It was actually, man, I should fact check myself before I say this, but I was just in Revelstoke, British Columbia for Christmas doing some snowboarding, and the Columbia runs through Revelstoke.
What?
Now I'm using my other monitor to go fact check myself.
That's our good old friend Google. We started using it more.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a big river up in Revelstoke, which is, a good 5 hours north of the border there. Yeah, I mean, it's for sure the Columbia. I just pulled up a map and it definitely runs right through Revelstoke. Yeah, it starts, way up in British Columbia and runs all the way down.
Yeah. So many tribs and everything. There's a lot of good tribs on the Columbia that you can fish.
I mean, just the fact that the Snake is considered a trib, right? Like that's also just another massive watershed
in the States.
Yeah.
What's mind blowing to me is how far like Steelhead and stuff go up, and all those, they got to go through all those dams and all those, they got a lot of challenges all the way into there. So it's just mind blowing to me.
So quick rewind back to Canada last week. We did this big loop. We started in Missoula, drove up to Revelstoke, over to Kamloops, and then back down to Missoula. And when we were driving from Kamloops to Missoula, like I was going like 35, snow covered road. It was -17, and just like the Canadian experience. And we drive over this little, 2-lane bridge, I don't know, a creek 20 feet wide. And there's like signs on both sides of it, like salmon habitat, da 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 da. And it's just like we're in this frozen never land, nowhere near the ocean. And here's like this salmon habitat sign. And I was like, hell yeah, this place is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's crazy.
I can't imagine, living out west here, 100 years ago when some of these salmon runs were Alaskan-esque, would have been so wild.
Well, it's like my grandfather, he would tell me the stories before they dammed up the Columbia. Like when he was a kid, he'd go across, he's like, or when we go over duck hunting, my uncle would show me, he's like, yeah, there used to be a bridge and a road that would go down here. And when they put the dams on the Columbia, it washed the bridge out. And, but it's just like crazy to think about. It's like, that wide Columbia was it was a lot smaller than it was, today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And flowing a lot heavier, even though she flows pretty heavy, even though she don't look like it.
Yeah. And the stories of like salmon, they would tell me like, oh, the salmon they would catch out are as tall as, the king salmon are like as tall as you coming out of he's like, and that was just like a normal size fish in the Columbia. And no longer, we just don't have that size, and a lot of factors into it, but.
Indeed.
So do you do a lot of traveling this time of year to go snowboarding all over the place?
I try to travel as much as possible. I pretty much have 3 hobbies. I hunt, I snowboard, and I fish. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of the big out of the ordinary one for us was that Canada jaunt, but we'll make it over to like Jackson Hole and Targhee, which is only like a 6-hour drive from here. We'll do Big Sky, which is over in Montana. I live with my cousin here, and her and I always just buy some type of conglomerate pass that covers days at a bunch of different places, and we'll usually like sleep in her Subaru, or we'll usually grind it out pretty hard to not spend too much money on a ski trip, because they rack up quick. We're eating turkey sandwiches in the parking lot and doing the gig, but it's pretty damn fun. I love it.
Heck yeah. I love how it's like, oh, it's just 6 hours away. I love how like people like Wyoming, Montana, like Alaska, like 6 hours, nothing.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like even growing up in Wisconsin, like my perspective has changed greatly in the 5 years that I'm here. Like I'm driving an hour to go pretty much anywhere hunting or fishing. And like I live in Missoula, and I'm being picky. Like there's a shit pile of spots I could drive less than an hour, but I'm going to see people. I'm going to be fishing bigger water than I like. And like, I don't know. I have no problem driving 2 hours to fish, 2 hours one way to fish for 2 hours. Like it just is what it is.
Yeah.
And gas, I don't even look at gas prices, just a sunk cost. Like I'm not going to sit at home and do nothing. Like I'm going to put gas in my truck.
You got to get out. You got to enjoy it,
Have you guys been to Canada?
I have not personally.
I have. It's been a while though.
So their gas prices, dude, I was tripping the whole time. Like it would say like 146.6. So like 146.6 is how I read it, right?
Yeah.
But it and it took us a little while and obviously some Google searching to figure it out, but they do it in liters, which is obvious. Like I should have known that. I don't really know the exact liter to gallon conversion, but it was almost $5 a gallon. It was like $4.60 some odd cents in one of the spots where we filled up. And so, and a lot of the gas stations make you like pre-buy the gas. So like you put your credit card in and then you choose like 75, 100 or $250. And I was like, $250. That's an insane amount, but we're talking Canadian again, right? So like multiple times I'd choose 75 and I'd get like 3/8 of a tank. So I just have to like go multiple times. It was long story long. It was the gas prices in Canada are confusing.
I remember the first time I ever came to Alaska, I was 10, 2008. And my family and I actually drove from Washington in a motorhome through Canada, British Columbia, Yukon into Alaska. And that was the year where we had high gas prices too. And it was like, is it even worth driving a freaking motorhome that gets 8 miles per gallon through Canada with those gas prices? But yeah,
that's awesome. The Canadian road trip is definitely on the list. And literally this morning, I was just like kind of scheming about either because I'm going to get up to Alaska again this summer to do some fishing. My sister lives in Juneau, so it makes it really easy for me to just like go crash. But it costs about $3,000 to take the ferry from Bellingham to Juneau with a car. Which you can make that, and it's like 55 hours. So it's like you're not saving a whole lot of time. I mean, obviously you can sleep the whole time, but the drive from Missoula is like 34 hours. And, you know, when you punch in old Gas Buddy to tell you the estimated cost, it was like $600 worth of gas. So
you weigh out what, you know, you're sitting on a boat with a bunch of people, or you can just be driving and get But some of the roads that you're going to take up to into Alaska is going to be pretty gnarly.
Yeah, probably not very good. Scenery would be amazing though.
100%.
Yeah. And I mean, just I got to imagine there's a lot of water to be fished between there and here.
Oh yeah. So when you head up to Alaska, do you cut up into Canada right away and cut over, or do you come up through like Washington and
Oh, dude, this was just like a pipe dream this morning. Honestly, like just diddling around on the internet. I was like, I could just take a couple of weeks and drive up there and boat back or something, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. It might just be easier to fly up and then.
For sure. It's just like, I want to do the Canada drive at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you're going to do it, you're either going to just go for it, or I'm going to be like 65 and decrepit and retired,
Yeah, absolutely. You never know. Life's short. You got to enjoy it. So
yeah, you just got to go for it and, go make some memories and experience some things while you can, for sure. Yeah. While you're fired up about it too. If you sit on it too long, it's always like, nah. At least that's how it is for me.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about something, I got to kind of act on it. Otherwise it just kind of goes by the wayside.
You're like, oh man, I need to, I want to go fishing. It's like that day you need to go buy a plane ticket or something, so it makes you like go out there and do it.
Get plans solidified, man.
Yeah,
100%.
So let's loop back around. Let's get on to you talked about you did a little guiding. Let's hear how it got you up. Did you say you did it in Alaska?
Yeah. So basically my sophomore year of college, I went up to Alaska, lived with my sister. We lived on a sailboat, and I was basically just a fishing bum. I was a barista at a coffee shop, basically to get me by, to buy flies and like help, buy food and things.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with Alaska. I guess that was probably 2015. And then that next year I was like, you know what? I just want to go see the bush. My dad always talked about Bristol Bay, but like he never went there. And, you look at these prices to go fish at a lodge, or, you start figuring out what it would take to go do it yourself, having never been there and not really knowing anybody who'd been there. it all is just like, man, it's either going to be really expensive, a real crapshoot, or I could just like, go try to get paid and go see what it's about. And so that's kind of what I did. I just like started doing a pile of research on like, all right, where are the places that I think would be sweet to check out, find some lodges. And I don't remember how many inquiries I sent. I would literally just go into like their info at email, whatever contact they had, and I'd like drummed up a little cover letter and just started sending them out left and right. And I heard back from a few places, and most of it was going to be like camp hand duties, right? Because like I didn't have any guiding experience. We were out there, and they were just going to be looking for somebody to pull some of the grunt work. And then this one particular lodge, Alagnac Lodge on the Alagnac River, they got back to me and they're like, hey, yeah, like we have a camp hand spot open. And like, if you are down to get your guide license, like we'll help you get that. And, I'm sure there'll be opportunities where, you can give another guy a day off or whatever and go fish. And so did the whole thing, got up there, and I was like, I don't know, I got up there in really early June. Like it was before fishing season was open. Cause I remember fishing the opener. And it was just three of us at this lodge, and it was an unbelievable experience, and more guys started coming in. By the time we were full capacity, like at the end of June, I think there was 8 or 9 guides. We had a house gal, we had a cook, and then like our lodge manager. And I think our max capacity was like 20 guests or something. It was not a fancy place though. We were staying in little dorm room cardboard shacks. We had a couple of like the guides all ate in tents outside. And then like the main lodge was a decent enough place, but it was not like your 5-star, $8,000 a day lodge. It was like your $4,000 a day. We'll take you fishing, but your accommodations aren't going to be, these beautiful log cabins on the riverbank. Yeah. But it was a sweet camp. I mean, a great set of dudes, but there was basically, I did camp hand duties for the most of the first like 2 weeks. And then exactly what happened to you, Kyle, some dude got Giardia. And then he ended up getting all fucked up, and they flew him back to like King Salmon, and long story long, he ended up going back to Louisiana. So then basically I just got plugged in as a guide for, that was like right around 4th of July. And then I went back to school, late August. So for the better part of a month and a half. But I had one group. I mean, if we want to just get into some stories, this was a tough day. This was before clients arrived. Something with the sewer system, which, we're in the bush. So use sewer system at, whatever your own imagination brings you to. I couldn't tell you about it because I don't know anything, but we had to hand scoop human shit out of a hole with a coffee can for about 6 hours in order to like lower it. We were like coffee can into 5-gallon pail, take pail out into the, alders 50 yards for 6 hours. That was pretty tough. I mean, it was just like, I didn't smoke cigarettes. Everybody else in camp definitely did. And I definitely just like had a cigarette in my mouth that whole day, just, like burning it for the smell. So you just weren't, basking in human feces that you were scooping out of this hole. So that was a pretty terrible day. We all lit every piece of clothing that we were wearing in a ceremonial fire at the end of that day. So that was a tough one. So keep notes of these if you're listening to this, wanting to be a guide. And another pretty good one was we had this group from Argentina come in.
All right.
And I got 2 dudes that didn't speak a lick of English. And I was your pretty quintessential like shitty Alaska fishing guide, like some college kid that he loves to fish. He'll bring you to the holes. Is he like a great fisherman? Absolutely not. Is he like a great guide? Absolutely not. But most of my clients like had a pretty good time in my boat. It's Alaska. It's like hard not to catch fish. At least at certain times. Don't get me wrong. We definitely had some days where it was like, holy shit, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, sorry. But they were there to catch chums, which the Alagnac River is like known for its chum fishery. Mm-hmm. And these two guys they couldn't cast more than about 10 feet. I had zero ability to communicate with them. And I think we went an entire day without catching a fish. And everybody else at camp was like hooting and hollering about these fish they caught. People were like breaking rods. And my two dudes were just like, we have this idiot. Like, he can't even get us to catch a fish. And eventually, like, I finally got the language barrier figured out. And they really had a problem with like me demonstrating how to cast. They wanted to like do it all themselves. And it's just like, man, I can't even talk you through how to do anything because they didn't speak any English, no Spanish here. But like that was definitely the most frustrating couple days of the summer, was just like a complete inability to get my clients to catch fish when all of their buddies were catching fish. And like that's definitely the worst part for me of being a guide, was like when you just fell short and you were incapable of like bridging the gap between your client's abilities and the needed abilities to like catch fish or harvest an animal. Like that really sucked as a guide.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have some similar stories of things along the same lines.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's definitely something that you're always working on. It's like there's always something else that pops up, and there's like, how do I get this through this person's head? Like, this is what you need to do. It never stops. It's always ongoing.
Yeah.
Well, like every person that you come across is going to be a little bit different, the size, capability, where they're from, what they've done, their back, everything. There's so many factors that play into it. So just being able to, like, in some ways, you got to be able to teach yourself how to teach a bunch of different people, right? Like there's so many challenges that you face.
People learn so differently. It's a respect I gain for teachers themselves, because I mean, like, as I said, these guys, they were not into visual learning. They wanted to be instructed. And I was just like, man, I don't know how to do that in this situation.
Yeah, that would be tough.
But no, it was super fun summer. I'd recommend anybody that like loves it, like even just going and being a camp hand. Honestly, being a camp hand was better than being a guide, because like once your duties around the place were done, changing filters so people didn't get giardia, burning garbage, gassing up boats, tinkering, fixing the sauna, and just doing like pitter patter shit. But then like oftentimes lodge managers are like, yeah, if you're done, like grab the lone boat down there, go do whatever. And so I'd be like, okay, rip down river and go swing for kings, or do whatever. Way more often as a camp hand than I ever did anyway as a guide.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not like burned out at the end of the day from like, oh shit, I've been on the river for 8 hours. I go back, I want to just chill out, right?
Yeah.
When you're guiding, but when you're like a camp hand, you can go do whatever when you're done. We had a friend, Kylie, who was on the podcast. She was doing that at Togiak River Lodge. And she said she did that a lot more when she was helping around at camp. And then when she was done, she'd go out and do the same thing.
Yeah, no, there's no shame in being a camp hand. I mean, shit, maybe when I retire, that's what I'll go do again. I'll just be like this old grumpy ass camp hand.
There you go.
So yeah. Were you a fly guide, or were you like a gear guide?
We did some of both. We did like a lot of, back trolling for King's plugin. But then we'd also have folks come in that, they wanted to catch chums all day until their wrists felt broken, on a fly rod. I would say it was honestly probably about a 50-50 split. Yeah. The kingfish in the year I was there was brutally hard. I mean, we hit some kings, but it was, and like, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have also battled the the bloodthirsty client that just wants to bonk everything. Which, I mean, shit, it was really hard for me to bonk a legal limit of one king off that river. Like, it was, I don't know, it sucked. I hated killing them. But also I understand like that's what their primary reason for coming up was, is like they wanted to go home with a box full of fish and some good memories. So like that was tough. I lost my train of thought and where this question started, really. Oh, gear and fly. So really no fly fishing for kings, really just gear. And then chums. It was not a pink year, unfortunately. Would have been cooler if it was. Talk about an easy fish to catch.
Dude, for sure.
Chums was mainly fly, and then we had a pretty sweet silver run, which I really just got to see the beginning of, having to leave in mid-August there. But that was also primarily fly fishing. And those fish are so fun. Definitely a hoods up, sunglasses on at all times kind of game. The amount of times I got whacked in the back of the head with dumbbell eyes was, I don't know, so freaking many. I also really enjoyed watching fly rods break. Maybe that was really wrong of me as a guide, but man, it was just hilarious to watch, like, especially with chums, people would be on like their dozenth chum in the last 2 hours, and they'd be fishing their 7 weight or whatever. And they would be really tired of this thing getting to 10 feet and then taking a 20-foot run. And you could just start to see them, they'd really start to lean into it. They'd be putting a hand on the graphite, and you'd be like, hey man, I wouldn't put that hand like off the cork. And they just get tired of fighting the fish, and then there goes their sage, their $800 sage rod just exploded on day 2. And then I like hand them this Reddington Path, and then they explode that one. And it's like, well, good run, man.
Yep. I know.
You can watch fish run from camp.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's kind of, it's a cool experience to get to go do that and just be out there for that amount of time and just explore and learn more about Alaska that way.
Yeah, again, like the only way that you could really do that, unless you have a pile of money, is you go work it and you go see it. It's pretty outstanding when your commute is just ripping a boat up river. Your backyard, you walk 30 feet from your crappy little dorm room, and you're looking at just vast expanse of bush, tundra, aldery stuff with sweet rivers and giant rainbows and salmon everywhere. It's definitely an experience worth chasing if you can handle. I think I was there for 70 some odd days or something like that. It was a long time. By about 55, I definitely was counting down the days to get back to civilization. But I think that's most people in that situation.
For sure. You have any good bear stories or anything like that?
I really don't have any great bear stories from guiding there. We did a couple flyouts. We didn't do many flyouts, but I was on one in particular that was super beary, but I just never had a problem with any of the bears up there. Do you have some good bear stories?
I don't. Since I've been up there, I've only seen one bear, and that was from the plane.
Oh, okay.
Or one brown bear. So yeah. I haven't had any encounters yet.
My first summer in Alaska in 2015, when I was more of just a fishing bum, I did have to spray a brownie. I was just fishing in this remote little creek that we'd boated to. I was there with just a buddy. It was actually a creek that he could do some commercial harvest on, so he could like seine for some of these sockeyes. But being a non-resident, like I just went there and I was just like fly fishing. Mm-hmm. And I went like way up this creek, and he had a 12 gauge, and I had like my bear spray. Like it was a pretty berry spot. And I was returning from the top of the creek, and I had like a sockeye that I had caught, and then like my rod and my little pack. And I was kind of like climbing over this little cliff embankment, and I'd seen a number of bears throughout the day, but they were doing their thing. I was doing mine. And all of a sudden, like I got around this rock that I had to like climb over. and it happened so fast. I really don't know. I don't think he had like malicious intentions, but he was coming at me very quickly, and he was at about 6 feet. So it was just like, yeah, it happened so quick. It was just like bear spray. I actually had it in my hands miraculously, but basically sprayed everywhere. He went charging back into, the thick devil's club crap. And at this point, I'm obviously like screaming. And again, like it all happened so fast. I had no idea he was there. I really don't even know if he knew I was there. It was just like really tight quarters where we ran into each other.
Yeah.
But so at that point, like my buddy Jeff heard me, and I started like tromping through the woods to get to him. And no sooner than I got to him, and this bear comes like barreling out of the Devil's Club, and like, I don't know, 15 feet into this creek, and we're kind of like on this little island of the creek, and he's just fucking pissed. And he's kind of like bluff charging us. And so at that point, like we're yelling, making a bunch of noise, and he just like keeps bluff charging. And at this point, he's, I don't know, 6-7 yards. And then my buddy Jeff, he had a rubber slug as the first one, and he put a rubber slug right in that thing's ear hole. And it like, made a big splash about in the river and like smacked at its ear, went back into the brush there. And at this point, we're like packing up the little dinghy, like trying to get out of there. And I don't know, 30-40 seconds after he shot that thing with the rubber slug, it comes charging back out into the creek, like as we're loading up into the boat and getting out of there. So that was a pretty interesting bear encounter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is crazy.
Yeah, it was, that one was pretty crazy. I looking back on it though, like it's a fun story to tell, and it's kind of a fond memory.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm not confident that bear ever had malicious intent. Like when I sprayed it at, close quarters, I think maybe I just pissed him off to begin with. I don't know.
Yeah. But like when you're that close to a grizzly, it's like, it's either, it's like, even if he didn't have malicious intent, you just don't know, because you can't tell. But
and it was like it was just like a pure reaction. Like I had, like that bear was so close to me when I first saw it, like bear spray, as I said, with like, thankfully it was already in my hands. Like I barely remember the moment. You know what I mean?
yeah, you just, at that point, like adrenaline took over.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. Bears, typically in Alaska, they don't give you a whole lot of problems, at least in my experience, but definitely nothing to let your guard down around.
Yeah. I've heard just like when the fish are running and they're fat and happy, they really don't want to bother you.
Literally, 2 hours before that encounter, there was like a lone subadult male, is what my buddy determined. I didn't really know much about brown bears at the time, but that's what he claimed it to be. But earlier that day on that same creek, I was fishing. There was a sow and 2 cubs like 20 yards upstream of me, and I was just like making casts, roping pink salmon, and they're just like eating pink salmon at their free will, like hanging out, totally kosher. And that's kind of been my experience. I've had less than like 10 encounters with brown bears when I've been up in Alaska, but that's been my experience every time I have, is like they're doing their thing, you're doing your thing, and it'll be good. But definitely not a time to let your guard down though.
Mm-mm. So we've been talking a lot about fishing and stuff. Let's get to hunting. Like, where has hunting taken you? Would you say like your job helped you get into, explore around the United States or around the world or wherever you've gone? And then I know you mentioned you really like whitetail hunting. So where's like where's some of your favorite places you've been or like explored, or like the culture of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, OnX definitely has propelled my ability to hunt more and more. There's no doubt about that. It's definitely been a sweet gig. Fortunate to land here. But some of my favorite adventures, I mean, this past year, my sister and her husband and I had been planning a dall sheep hunt for about a good 2.5 years before it came to fruition this past August. And so we just, I mean, a complete DIY. We picked the zone, got flown in, and then we had pack rafts. So we rafted about 10 miles down a big river shed and then hiked in a ways. And I mean, that was an unbelievable hunt. I think we saw 25 sublegal rams. Had a couple just super close calls. Found a dead ram carcass a couple days into our hunt. So like somebody else in there had found a legal one. But we didn't see any other hunters. It was just a crazy experience to be in there, and just those mountains are so nuts. Where those things live is very unforgiving country. And then we pack rafted about 80 miles out of our hunt zone. So that was a trip in and of itself. But that was definitely like my greatest hunt I've ever been on. And we came out like completely unsuccessful, quote unquote. If you base success on a punch tag, which I've come to find is not a good measure of success. You're not successful very often that way. But that was kind of my big hunt this past year. But I also, I hunt Wisconsin every year for whitetails. That's kind of my favorite spot, is to return home. There's something nostalgic about it. Wisconsin and Iowa. And then, I mean, elk hunting, like if you have a passion for hunting, you need to chase an elk. I mean, just to hear those things like bugling and screaming in September, and that's an unbelievably fun hunt. And oftentimes the weather's decent. That's the one thing about Alaskan hunts, is weather is just so tough. Yeah. Like not only are the critters like gnarly and live in gnarly places, and there's bears that might eat you, but the weather's just so unpredictable. And it really makes you or breaks you. I mean, on that sheep hunt, we had a number of days with just like, you couldn't see more than 20 feet because we were just socked in, and it's just like, you sit up there, you traveled all this way and you can't do shit because you can't see. But yeah, elk hunting's definitely a sweet one. And something I'd certainly try to always spend at least a full solid week of doing. It's something that I find hard to find success when you're just doing it for a weekend, which I think is the case for a lot of things. But one of those critters where you need to figure out where they are, what they're doing there, and then, make your move and get in on them. It really helps when they're vocal in September. But more so than like just having a patient strategy. If I'm whitetail hunting and I can hunt every weekend for the month of November, I'm confident that I'm going to spend enough time there where I'm going to kill one. Whereas elk's like, all right, I got to put in just a hell of a lot of effort for as long as I can in order to kill one. But I don't know, the hunting just is, the beauty of it is it takes you so many places, and there's so many different critters to go experience, to chase. Whitetails is more like, people call it the lazy man's game. I'd call it the patient man's game. Cause yeah, I love sitting in a tree waiting on them, but obviously chasing dall sheep and getting your ass absolutely kicked by your environment is something I really enjoy too. Something about type 2 fun that's definitely intriguing.
Yeah,
that's cool. I see a lot of beards behind you too there on the wall.
Yeah, I failed to mention turkey season, which honestly is like maybe my favorite for pure enjoyment of the hunt. So like, it's super low key. If the turkey comes in, you miss, like, it's not like I'm not beating myself up for days over it. It's like, shit, I'll go find another one. But it's kind of like a small game of elk hunting. Like, they gobble, it's interactive. The spring woods are hard to beat. Flowers are popping, birds are singing. Sunny 10 a.m. naps are really hard to beat. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing that you can put out there and I'd be like, nah, I don't want to go hunt that.
Big strutting Tom coming into your decoys. That's super cool to see.
Yeah. Do you guys do some of that out in Washington there?
Yeah. Well, Keaton's tried, right, Keaton?
I've tried. I've been unsuccessful. We get Toms like strutting, and they'll come in. I had a hen like, I went out one spring and I had a hen like probably like 40 yards from us. And I was like, oh, sweet, the hen's here. Like, she'll bring in a Tom or some more hens or something, and then we'll be partying here pretty soon. And the hen runs up. She looks at our decoy. She looks around. She's like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. She took off running down the hill, and I'm like, oh fuck, man. And we're just sitting. I mean, we had toms. Like we saw toms. We were driving down the road, and we saw toms on the side you couldn't hunt. So we set up on the other side of the road, and you could see them like just right down, down in this big clear cut, and we're up on this, and we started talking, and he started strutting, and we're like, he's gonna come. And then the hen flew in, and we're like, oh, this is finally coming together. And then the hen takes off. The tom, he just drops out of his strut, and he runs off with his hens. And my uncle's like, yeah, he's not coming. He's with his hens. He's satisfied. So, but it's on my to-do list. I'm gonna kind of pick it up a little more. Those were, and I don't know if there's like a big difference, but those, we were hunting Rios. So
we have all three in Washington. We have Rios, Easterns, and Merriams.
Yeah,
different parts.
Oh, okay. There is a little pocket of Rios, aren't there? I actually have heard about that previously. And then Eastern Washington is like mostly Easterns, isn't it?
No, so in Eastern Washington, the Rios, I think, are more like the southeast portion, like down the Blue Mountains.
Yep.
Yeah, Merriam is kind of in the central, and the Easterns are actually on the west side of the state.
Really?
Yeah, they're actually in some of the little pockets in Western Washington.
Huh. Yeah, I have not hunted Washington for turkeys, and I've hunted most of these the western states near Montana, but I've heard it has some good bird populations.
Yeah. I've hunted turkeys and shot turkeys in like the northeastern portion, central Washington, down in the Blues. They're pretty fun. I think you can shoot 3 birds in the spring and like 4 in the fall or something like that.
Yeah. Fall turkeys, man, it breaks my heart when people are shooting fall gobblers.
Yeah.
Meant to come in strutting and gobbling and shoot those hens in the fall.
Exactly. I had permission on this property in central Washington, and in the spring he had a bunch of bearded hens. But I didn't want to shoot it was legal, but I didn't want to shoot a hen in the spring. So I waited until I got drawn for a fall tag in that area, and I went down like, I'm shooting a bearded hen this fall, and it was nice. Finally shoot a bearded hen.
Heck yeah! Did you make a wing bone call or do anything with her?
No, I mounted her fan and her beard. It's like an 8-inch beard. It was really wispy. It was like as thick as a pencil, but it was pretty cool to shoot a bearded hen.
Nice, man.
I don't know enough about like turkey hunting and stuff, but like this fall, I thought it was really interesting. I had a client, and we're floating down the Yakima, and we hop out, and he's streamer fishing, and I look up on the hillside. It was like turkey gangland going on up on the hillside. Like you just see this one pod, and it's like it's got like 1 or 2 toms and a bunch of hens. This other pod comes in, and then they like I've never seen it in fall, but they went like full strut on each other, and they were just like straight on, like getting at each other, throwing talons. And I was like, I've never seen this. I didn't know this would happen in the fall. But like I said, I'm not like a biologist or anything, but I kind of wonder if there's like, there's like a later kind of something going on, or I don't know. But it was pretty crazy to see.
Turkeys are nutty, man. They get weird about their flock, and I can't explain any reason why they'd be fighting in the fall, because they certainly ain't laying eggs in the fall. But yeah, they're crazy birds. They're super fun to hunt, and I would say if like you're just getting into the sport, they're definitely one of the better species to choose to kind of enter into the hunting world, just because, as I said, you don't need that much equipment. You need like a shotgun and, buy a turkey call, and you're kind of in the game. And weather's typically decent, and the bar isn't so high as going out trying to shoot a deer or an elk or whatever it may be.
And I think when you're getting new hunters out there, it's not as like, for someone that's never been in the culture of hunting, it's not as brutal to watch. Like, I always tell people that are just getting into hunting, I'm like, you should go do like waterfowl hunting, or like maybe go shoot a turkey, because that's going to give you like just enough of that. Like, you have to harvest something, so you're going to kill something. I think if you get people like on a big elk or something right away, that's a lot to absorb,
Yeah, that's an interesting point that, just from being raised in it, like that aspect of it doesn't even really come to mind for me, but that's a super good point.
Yeah. I started a little bit later in life. I started when I was like 8, 9. So you know, the first thing I hunted was a deer. And when I first, I was like, holy shit, I just shot a deer, you know, and you got to gut it and you're looking at it. But like, once you kind of get past the point, like, okay, what I've done is I've done. And now I'm here I got to do what I got to do. And it's going to provide me meat and everything. So.
Totally.
Yeah. One more thing about going back on turkey, I think like my clients, when I'm taking them down river, when they see a turkey fly, they're so surprised. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. Like a lot of people, you know,
think they're ground dwellers.
Yeah, they think they like run. I'm like, no, they nest in trees. And like even me, when I first saw it, I was like, what is that giant bird flying around? And he's like, that's a turkey. And they run up to the highest point and they jump and they soar, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a big bird moving through the air.
Yeah.
I think so. The place that Keaton's talking about, I think you'd like this, Jared. It's like you're like floating through a canyon, and there's like these really thick cottonwoods on both sides, like these big cottonwoods, some ponderosas they'll roost in. And this one flock that Keaton's talking about, there's like 12 toms, and then there's like 30 hens, and they live in like this like 2 mile area. And they're just always there, and they're always gobbling in the spring. My other buddy and I have tried to hunt them before, but you can pretty much count on it. Like probably 8 out of 10 trips you float down the river, you're going to see those turkeys like right on the banks of the river. It's pretty cool to see them in that spot. And then sometimes you'll look up and they're like on the canyon walls, just like way up on these cliffs, just eating bugs and snakes or whatever they can find up there in the sagebrush. It's pretty crazy to like see going from the river, like cottonwoods, ponderosas, and then just in the sagebrush. It's pretty cool to watch them.
That is super interesting. Western turkeys, man, they're wild. Like the stuff that they'll, as you said, kind of just like, why the hell are they on that cliff? I don't know. Or they'll be like in this bluffy, craggy stuff out here in eastern Montana, particularly. It's like turkeys do not belong here, but here they are.
Exactly.
It's always nice when you get some wildlife on your fishing floats too, especially on a slow day. That was a nice thing about Alaska. It's like, oh, there's a moose swimming across the river, you know, what have you. It always breaks up slow fishing decently.
Exactly. So I'll go ahead, Keaton.
I was gonna say I did a little fishing in Bozeman Ennis this past fall, and it was pretty cool to see like the Shire moose out in the Madison.
You saw some Shiras, huh?
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Young bull just drinking from the water, standing out, and you're like, wow, it's a little smaller piece of Alaska, like in the lower 48 kind of feeling, which is cool to see.
Yeah, no doubt. I see you're wearing a Grizzly Hackle shirt, so that's got to come from Missoula here.
Oh yeah, I stopped by and visited. That's a cool shop.
Well, half off your first dozen dries or nymphs on Fridays.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the real deal. I don't ever support the nymph business, but I buy plenty of dries.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Everyone wants the dry eats.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Kyle, what did you do?
Yeah, so I mean, earlier when we talked about you guiding Alaska, kind of working at camp at the lodge, that was kind of outdoor industry, but kind of tell us how you kind of got to where you're at OnX and how you first got into the industry and ended up where you are now.
Yeah. So when I first started at OnX, right out of school, I actually had a gig like lined up to go back to Alaska and guide again. But then a job opening for OnX, and more honestly, like I'd met a girl. Then obviously, like if you go to Alaska for the summer, like that just doesn't really work. And so her and I moved out to Montana when I got a customer support job at OnX. Like I was just answering phones. And I was maybe like employee 60 something at that point at OnX. So it was already like fairly established. And thankfully, and actually a part of the reason that they hired me, the founder of OnX, he actually founded OnX as a hunting guide in Eastern Montana. He just like repeatedly was having issues figuring out where there's public versus private land, because there's not like much for fences out here. So that's how he ended up developing OnX, and he actually would like handwrite a little welcome letter. And I remember like in mine, he said something about like, hey, stoked that you were a previous guide, like, you know what it takes to serve clients, da 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 da. So that was like an interesting tidbit from having guided in Alaska and the transition to OnX, and then did customer support for just one fall, thankfully, because walking crotchety old men who don't know how to use a phone, let alone run an app, that was a lot to handle. Spending 35 hours a week on the phone with people, trying to tell them how to get to their Google Play Store, let alone how to turn a layer on, or start a track, or whatever it might have been inside the Hunt app. And then moved into my marketing role. It really was just a case of being in the right time at the right place. Because I mean, really, after I was at OnX about a year and a half, we kind of exploded. I mean, now we, have close to 300 employees. And it's just, so much larger scale than it was previously when I got there. But I would say getting into the outdoor industry, like being a guide is a great foot in the door. I mean, it's a job that gives you some well-roundedness that not many other gigs can give you. I mean, you learn a lot about like, putting the customer first. I mean, that's a big tenet at OnX, is like, we put the customer first. We build things and design things and make decisions with the end user in mind. And I mean, that's what you're doing all day long as a guide. Like, even if it's a shitty day on the water and you can't get them to catch a fish, like, you need to find other ways to ensure that their $400 doesn't feel like a complete flop. And so, I mean, you just gain such a wide array of experiences being a guide, or like even being like a camp cook or a packer or a camp hand, like we talked about. Like, those things are honestly great gigs to do in college summers or high school summers, or whenever you have the opportunity to do that early on. It also like gets you an idea of what you might not like about gigs, because like the whole service aspect, like one-on-one as a guide, like I knew, I was like, man, I do not like this. Like I always felt like an overwhelming amount of pressure on a shitty fishing day. Like those were shitty days. And I hated that. So you learn things like that. But, and then the other thing getting in the outdoor industry is just like make as many connections as possible. I mean, it's pretty easy this day and age, especially like with social media and the ability to start a podcast or link up with guys like you through a podcast. Like it's an easy way to get to know some people, understand what they do, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. That'll help you figure out what you might like about it, what you might not. And then, I mean, another way that's an easy way to get into doing outdoorsy thing is, which, I mean, a ton of people have been doing this now for a couple of years, is pick up a camera. I mean, they're like documenting what you've done, especially if you're doing it for the right reasons. And that's being that you want to document it and you want to keep these experiences. But I mean, the amount of people that I've connected with from the position I'm in at OnX, with just like folks that carry around a camera and create great content and can provide us, value. It's like, not that I'm saying carrying around a camera and the upfront cost and taking good pictures is easy, but it's a pretty relatively easy foot in the door to, if you really aspire to work at, Yeti or whatever the example may be, reaching out and just being like, hey, this is what I am interested in doing. I'd love to, hear back on what kind of the steps are. I mean, I answer emails not infrequently that are like, hey, I'd love an internship X, Y, or Z. And it's kind of the same playbook. Like, hey, like, thanks for reaching out. We're stoked that you love the product. Like, if you have feedback, we're open to it. I mean, like, we're always hiring. So it's pretty easy for me, honestly. It's like, hey, keep an eye on our careers page. But put your name out there. You can't get a job if you don't know, anything about it. And you certainly have a lot better odds. It's all about who you know, not necessarily what you know or what you know today, because you can certainly figure that out as you go, or if you have the desire to learn. There's so many resources out there to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication and just networking. I think that like when I first got into this, I didn't think it played a big role in the outdoor industry, but as you slowly find out, if you're doing like cleanups or you're doing you're working your job and you're just trying to make yourself a little bit better at what you do, having that connection with people is a big thing. So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just to tie it back to the whole guide thing again, it's like you look around the outdoor industry, if that's kind of where you want to end up, like, I mean, most of Meat Eater's personalities. I mean, you look at like Giannis Putelis, Miles Nolte on their fishing side of things, Remy Warren with Cutting the Distance podcast, multiple employees at OnX, including our founder. Like they all started as guides. Like it's interesting how that's kind of a crucial stepping stone for a lot of people getting into the outdoor industry and how much value it does provide.
yeah. Well, and I think too is you learn a lot about not only yourself and your capabilities, because like I don't think a lot of people realize how much setup that goes into taking people on a guide trip, or while you're out there, you're in charge of safety, you're rowing, you're a teacher, you're a cook. I mean, there's
logistics planner, yeah, like everything.
Knowing like your insect hatches, knowing where fish are sitting, like when I first got behind the sticks on a drift boat, I was like, oh, I can keep us straight, I can go down river, but then getting to the point where you're like, oh, I gotta slow my boat down enough, and I gotta work in like crooks and little side pull offs and knowing where to go and what to do. That took a lot to learn. Anyone can row you down safely, but
not anyone. Give yourself more credit than that.
Not
and the other dude, like what you're doing there, like doing boat trout guide trips has got to be some of the hardest guiding out there, in my opinion. Like you have so many differing variables going on, like to have to row, to be able to put your client in the right spot where that individual client is fishing, whether that's 6 feet off the boat or 60 feet off the boat. And then to like the amount of knots and stuff that I had to retie sitting on a sandbank annoyed me. So I can't imagine like having to drop anchor, or row in place while trying to like tie stuff on. Like there's so much going on.
Yeah.
When you're fishing that way as a guide, like those dudes have it together.
But to loop it kind of back around into where we were, I think a lot of those, the things that we're learning as a trout guide or guiding in general, you're learning all this, like how to plan, how to run a business, how to do all this stuff. This really sets you up for success. And like what you're discussing, I think it really helps you help other people or benefit other people, especially moving forward in your career.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely some worthwhile gigs to be had.
Yeah. I don't think you could guide. I mean, I know people that do it, but I feel like after a few years of it, you're going to eventually want to move on, because it takes a little bit of, from what I found out my first year, is it takes work. You're exhausted at the end of the day.
The dudes who guide for like as a career are just, they're a different breed.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So would you say then kind of where you're at in the industry, is this kind of like where you want to be? Is this kind of like your dream job? Is this where you want to end up in the outdoor industry, or do you ever want to branch out, maybe try other things? Or
yeah, no, it's hard saying, honestly. I've been overly fortunate in the fact that this is kind of my only real gig out of college, and it's, I don't have intentions of going anywhere anytime soon. OnX is a great place to work for. I'm passionate about what the company does in the name of access and helping people have more successful outdoor endeavors, whether that's helping you get down the river and find more fish and find an access point where you can go fishing, or helping you figure out that there's a little piece of public behind home that you never knew about, or, help you verify that, oh shit, like this 5 acres that I always thought was my neighbor's ended up being mine. Whatever the case is, like we get those type of stories and things all the time, where it's like, oh man, OnX was the XYZ of why I was able to harvest this or do that. And so that's like really cool to be a part of. But I think at some point, I'd definitely like to like have my own business of sorts. But until I have, that $1 million idea, that's just a pipe dream at this point. So,
Yeah.
And I think that can be said for a lot of people. I mean, that seems like a pretty common goal. But I really have said numerous times that at some point down the road, it would be awesome to own a lodge, I think, in Alaska. The money that it takes to do that these days definitely feels like a pipe dream. But at the very least, if I was, as I said, a 65-year-old guy and could go be a camp hand again and somehow swing that, maybe that's in my future in 35 years.
That's awesome. So let's, we kind of learned a little about you. We learned about your job, and I want to kind of touch base on like some of your favorite things about OnX. Like what have you really found? Is there anything useful that you don't mind sharing to people that are listening or just getting into the app?
Yeah, for sure. So I honestly use the app a pile for both fishing and hunting. Yeah. Particularly the logistics and planning on the fishing side. Like, it's so easy if you flip the topo on, when you have your base maps, you have the satellite, the hybrid of the topo. Topo just makes water pop. And what I do out west here is I'm just looking for water that is not near roads. That's like, I'll spend hours on web map, just like cruising around. You can do the same thing on Google, like find, remote trout streams near Boise, Idaho, and there'll be a number of things that pop up. And then you go over to OnX and you search, the North Fork of the Payette River or whatever it is that you want to do. And then you just get into rabbit holes. At least I do on OnX. Is like, okay, look at this big S curve. I'm going to flip on the satellite imagery. And oh, sure as shit, there's a giant deep pool right there. Like, you can see those things on the satellite imagery. If you start piecing things together, you drop a waypoint there, you find a good camp spot. And all of a sudden, in a matter of hours, you're like, okay, like I know exactly how I'm going to fish this river this weekend. You pull out the app, you drive yourself there, saved maps. If you're hunting or fishing pretty much anywhere in the country, make sure you use the offline features of the app. You can quickly just go into the app, save a new offline map, and then whether you have service or not, you're going to have the ability to navigate back to your truck, have all your data that you marked, whether, marking your camping spot or whatever it may be, it's all going to be there for you. So not only is it a safety backfall, but also it's just going to help you be more successful and more efficient with your time that you have out there. And then the map layers, there's a ton of different layers that a lot of people don't realize. Everything from current wildfires in the summer is a layer that we update every single day. We have a historic wildfires layer, so I use that a lot when figuring out, like elk spots, finding a burn that's 2 to 6 years old. It's going to have a ton of new growth and food. Or like the roadless area, that's one I use planning fishing trips. Again, like I find where roads aren't and where water is, and that's a pretty clear line of like, okay, that's an attractive spot for what I'm looking for. I also use it to map out floats a lot. I have like a shitty little Starcraft raft sitting out in front of me. And I'll just use the line distance tool and find 2 access points and be like, okay, that one's like, 8 miles and change. And then pending the time of year, I can kind of figure out, all right, that's going to be a 3-hour float or whatever it is. There's so many ways to use that app. They're endless.
Yeah.
How about you guys? What are some ways you guys put the app to use?
I personally, I love the offline. And when I started using the app, it took me a little bit. And I think if anyone's just getting into the app, my best advice would be to just get on there and just mess around and like just go through things. That's the way I figured it out. But I have had OnX for about 3 years, and I opened my OnX and I just got like things all over the place, all those waypoints and where I've been. And I really like my favorite feature, which is just a little feature, but I really like that I can select, like, I can make the emblem like a fish or like my trail cam, or like you wouldn't think that would be a big thing, but I can be like, oh, when I zoom in, I'm like, oh, here's my fishing spot. This is my trail cams. This is this. And it's really useful. But once it took me a little bit to figure the offline out and like saving and how it all worked. But like you were saying, like the offline is really beneficial. And I like that you can still download all the maps and then put the tracker on and go and do like walk out to your trail cam or wherever and not have to really like just worry about a whole lot. And you can just be like, oh, I got to go back down this path and I'm back to my truck. So
yeah, it almost becomes a crutch in that way. It's like, you're not really looking at landmarks. You're just kind of reliant on like, all right, this is going to get me from A to B back to A, which it's going to. But yeah, I mean, I've joked with some people that it kind of takes the need for a really honed sense of woodsmanship to be in the backcountry. It levels the playing field a little bit, and at least gives me the confidence to go really anywhere that I want to.
Yeah. I still gotta like I tried not to, because phones, you never know with phones.
I tried it in the river or it dies
I tried to find landmarks and like put them in my head. We're not, if people are listening, like the OnX is a great app, but also don't like put it to like 100%. You got to know what you're looking at and what trails you're on, because it can get fucked up real quick.
Yeah, there's no replacement for being observant and aware.
Yeah, absolutely,
for sure. And yeah, I use the offline feature a lot, especially back home. I always had maps downloaded. I actually got to the point where I had to like start like, okay, which maps can I get rid of, because I'm taking up too much space on my phone, and like deleting some of those areas off. But yeah, offline feature, like Keaton was saying, I like to like change my icons to like trail cams. I actually had a system where I ran like 8 trail cams last year, all over the place in Central Washington.
Oh, and hell yeah.
My active cams would be like the trail cam feature, and they'd be yellow, and then I'd click on it. And in the notes, I'd have like what lock I had on there, like what combo it was or what key it matched up with. Mm-hmm. And then I have like the last date that I checked that camera. And then I would be able to like update that every time. So I knew exactly when the last time that one was updated, when I should go back and check it. I'd go to the next one. I know where that one was at, because that one was yellow and that one was active. If I pulled that one, I would turn that yellow off and turn it to like a blue or a purple. So I knew it wasn't active anymore. And that's kind of how I ran my trail cam system.
Love it.
Yeah. And then if I was talking about places like sharing duck blinds with some of the guys, I would mark that as the blind. I'd put a picture of it, because sometimes the blinds are hard to see. So I would just like take a picture of the blind, where it was at, and then I could send that to them, a little bit of notes on like where to find it, how far in it is, and this kind of stuff. And if they had the app, I could share that waypoint to them, and they could pop up right on their phone. There's the photo, there's the waypoint, tell them how to get there. So I really like that feature a lot. Pretty much the whole Yakima River where I was guiding in Washington, like every wade access point and every boat launch is like
has a waypoint on it.
Has a waypoint on all the way down the river. So if like a client texts me later on, like, hey, we went and fished this spot, where can I go? I can like, oh, here's the waypoint. Boom. That's right where I took you. You can go back and fish that exact same spot.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that you guys are using it to that extent. That stokes me up, because the sharing capability, I beat that one to death. And I'm glad that you're using different colors, because I get pretty nerdy on my color coordination. I mean, every speed, like this year, all my deer hunting was purple. My elk hunting was black. My fishing is always white. So like, I have it pretty well organized, but there was a time when all you got was a generic red X. Like that was really like the only waypoint available there for a short while back in like 2015, 16. So I have a bunch of just red X's, but it's starting to come around and get a little bit more colorful.
Oh yeah.
As Keaton was saying, if you just sit down with it for 30 minutes while you're watching a TV or whatever, you can't break anything. Like, just start pressing buttons and see what they do.
Yeah, that's the best way. And I think there's quite a few layers to it.
So
And
many.
so just like knowing like, oh, you actually have layers that you can put on your maps. And then you also have like when you're selecting, you're putting a waypoint on. One thing that took me a little bit is I would set a waypoint and then I drag my finger and the waypoint would follow it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh, why is my waypoint all the way over there? I swear my trail camera was right over here. And then I'd be like, oh, I dragged it. And so I had to really make myself like push it and then get into it and save it. So, so I wasn't dragging it all over the place. But yeah, it's awesome. I love my map. I recommend it to most of my clients. I'm like, hey, if you're looking to get into fish, like, I mean, there's a lot of urban fisheries around me and I use them because you gotta, I found out places that I could walk in between houses pretty much and get down to the river, and not a lot of people know about it. So
Yeah.
in some sense, and then they can't really get upset with me. So it's awesome. I love the app. Like I use it almost like every day looking at stuff. So
Yeah, and it's really helpful, especially in states like, I don't know what the water access laws are in Washington, but I know like Colorado and Utah, like you own the stream bed. So like you got to know where you're at all times to be, legally fishing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like a lot of our big, and Kyle can speak on it a little bit. He might know a little more, but I know that like we have some smaller rivers, and if you can't float down it or like move down it, technically, I think they can own, like you can't walk up a creek in someone's yard, right? But if you can float a boat down it, then you can fish it. And we own the water, but some of the rivers, I've heard that same thing, like owners can own like gravel and stuff. So just figuring out like, I can technically float down this, but a lot of factors.
Yeah, for sure. High water mark in Washington too is like if you can access it publicly and you stay below high water mark, or you can float it, then technically you're legal. And then that's where OnX comes in, because you can find that public access point, hop in the river there, and then you can walk up river or down river as long as you're below high water or in the water. You're good to go.
Yeah, it's same in Montana. High water mark is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is. One thing up here too, OnX has helped me with, if I want to stick around Anchorage, I've been able to hop on OnX and I find a lot of that public land, or like some of the like management areas, like up here in the Chugach, there's like so many areas around Anchorage where they have to limit like access and where you can and can't hunt. And OnX has broken a lot of that down to where I can see the areas where I can hunt, what I can hunt there. When I was hunting on the coastal refuge here, like literally 2 minutes from my house in town for ducks this year on the coastline, like I could find places where there's access points. I could actually see blinds, like natural blinds on OnX, and I could find those little puddles and stuff that I could go hunt. Like during high tide, I can know right where to be, where to use that. So even in Alaska, where there's a lot of public land, if you're close to areas where there is a lot of population, or even like special management areas or areas like different units and stuff in Alaska, OnX has really been helpful with that too.
Yeah, it just gives you the confidence to like know where you are. Like you're not looking over your shoulder wondering like, am I doing the right thing? Because I mean, I think most folks out there have good intentions, even if they're caught trespassing or what have you. It's really just ignorance and really not knowing what's right, what's wrong. And OnX really just takes the questions out of it. Like you can just go out there and enjoy your time in the field. You don't have to be worried about whether you're legally on something that you can access or can't. It just takes a lot of the guesswork out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Real quick, have you been following? I'm pretty sure it's in Wyoming. The guys the hunters,
the corner crossing issue.
Corner crossing. That's crazy.
There's a lot going on about it, and we're actually coming out with a corner crossing report here pretty soon that kind of details the amount of land that is inaccessible due to corner crossing and some other things. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to see what's decided there, but it's not going to shake the corner crossing issue like I think so many people are hoping it will. If they get convicted of criminal trespass, things aren't going to change a whole lot. But if they don't get convicted, it's not like corner crossing is going to get this widespread legality across numerous states. It's a super complex issue, and frankly, I'm not educated enough to speak to it. We have a dedicated access team that they do a lot of that, working with attorneys and stuff and figuring out, really just providing the data, just because, that's what we specialize in. We're not a law firm. We specialize in maps and we specialize in data. And so where we aim to make our difference is providing the data and providing the knowledge of like, hey, this is what the public owns, like that landlocked piece of public is yours and mine and the next guy's. But currently we can't access it. And it's our goal to figure out some ways where we can help improve access to those spots, whether it be through easements or small land acquisitions, or, partnerships with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, who does a ton of stuff with access projects. Though an interesting case, like, yeah, it's, I think a lot of people are holding their breath over the verdict of it a little bit more than they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just want to add, we're kind of coming to an end here, but I think I do a lot of conservation work and stuff. And one thing that I really like about King County and the guy that I work with is that we're doing like habitat restoration, but I'm also trying to like push for like trails for fishermen access and stuff. So
nice.
I think that just having that, being like, hey, we got this, we're restoring it, but we also want to have like access for people to get out and enjoy. Because the more people, like, it's such a double-edged sword, you're like, oh, I don't want a lot of people knowing about this river, but also you want a lot of people knowing about this river to take care of certain places. And you hope that the people that come to visit the river are going to take good care of it as but not everyone's perfect, and we're still all learning, and we're only human. So
yeah, and it helps fund the resource, right? Like I always have that in the back of my mind with OnX. We hear so many times people are like, "Oh, you guys ruined my secret spot," or "Oh, like after everyone started using OnX, this public spot is overran and it sucks now." And like, I can sympathize with that. I've had that happen in some of my spots where it's like, all right, no doubt, there's more and more people using this piece of public that, X years ago nobody was ever here. But at the end of the day, like that means there's more money going to the Pittman Robertson. There's more money going to each state agency. They're able to do more wildlife restoration and all these things that are good for it. But it's definitely a frustration that I think anybody is going to have or has had if they, have done it for a long time or continue to do it. You're going to go to spots where somebody shoots something out from underneath you, or that's the way you feel, or you get beat to your parking spot, or somebody low holes you. But you know what? That's comes with the territory, I guess.
For sure.
And at the end of the day, like, just try to be representative of the guy that you'd want fishing next to you. Don't go low hole somebody. Like, is it really worth the feud to park on top of somebody and try to hunt the same duck hole that's 100 yards wide? Like, be the bigger person, go find a different spot, or if you're out of spots, shit, chalk it up to a coffee and a donut, or don't worsen the sport just for the sake of getting out there that one time. Be ethical about it. Ask somebody like, hey, like, we're both at this parking spot, do you mind if we hunt together? There's a lot of ways to go about it, and honestly, make a good pal while you're out there and have a future hunting buddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I want to say, like, I've been on duck ponds and people have rolled in later. And and I want to just be like, the inside, you're like, oh man, this guy's like trying to do this. But, the day and age that we're in, you got to kind of give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt and being like, hey, maybe this guy's new. Maybe he didn't know like the unwritten rules. There's not, you can't open your regulation book and be like, oh, I can't hunt the same pond as this guy or something. They don't know that. They see, they may be walking in a little later. They see us blasting some ducks and they're like, hey, I'm going to go throw my decoys out at this end, and we can share the ducks, but so I try to educate people as much as I can. And, you don't have to come off as an asshole every time you go to talk to someone. fishing in a closed creek or fishing, I reached out to someone the other day. I was like, hey, do you guys know this is closed? And they're like, oh, dude, we just came in from Montana and we just found this water and we went at it. And it's like, yeah, we're a little different here. We can't do that here, And they're
The
like,
old non-residents played in the fifth.
yep. So just you be a good sportsman, share, let people know. So
No doubt about it.
For sure. Well, Jared, we've taken a lot of your time here. We really enjoyed the conversation we've had. We don't want to take up too much more of your day. We've got a rapid fire round of questions here at the end that we want to throw at you.
Nice.
Before we do that, we always like to ask if there's anything that we haven't asked you yet that you think that we should know about you, whether that be your hunting, your fishing background, working at OnX, or anything you feel like you want to share with our audience.
No, I think we've pretty well covered it. I'd say, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in being a guide. You might be a young guide. You might be interested in the outdoor industry. And I mean, my advice would just be, take the leap, go for it. Like when I was sending emails to go be a camp hand guide, whatever you want to call me in Alaska, it was just like, you just got to start somewhere, even if you feel like an idiot where you're starting. You'll start to put the pieces together and it'll fall into place, and you won't regret it. It'll be good experience and you'll certainly make some good memories.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Well, Keaton, do you want to start us off into the rapid fire questions?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Rapid fire questions for you. Let's do your favorite fish and your favorite thing to hunt.
Favorite fish would be a bull trout. I love the places they live is really why. I mean, they just need that clean, cold water to thrive. And fortunately, the backcountry of Idaho, British Columbia, and the Western U.S. provides.
Mm-hmm.
And then my favorite thing to hunt, as I said, like if I only could hunt one thing for the rest of ever, it'd probably be whitetails for nostalgia reasons. But my favorite hunt of all time was no doubt that dall sheep hunt. I mean, there's nothing quite like what Alaska has to offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is a dream destination for you to both fish and then a dream destination to hunt?
So there's the good news is a river in Alaska that I really like to fish. Also Kamchatka, Russia. That one's, I don't know if that one will ever happen, but that would be sweet. Those would probably be my two fishy spots. I'll throw a third in there, being the Seychelles, to go catch a giant trevally. But boy, I better make some more money than OnX is paying me to make that happen. And then a dream hunt, really Alaska. I mean, my sister, brother-in-law, and dad and I are kind of planning an Alaskan moose hunt right now. But I really have strong intentions to hunt pretty much everything I can in Alaska, and really a dall sheep is still, we're already planning a return redemption adventure in like 2024 or 5. So that's my next big one.
It is nice having a next of kin living.
Dude, the next of kin is just like unbelievable. My sister is a gift from God.
That's awesome.
For your next one, you're out fishing, you're out hunting. What is your go-to snack and drink that you're going to have with you?
Okay, go-to snack is, that's a tough one. So what I learned on the sheep hunt is like taste quality over calories. Like I had so many bags of nuts and shit on that sheep hunt that like didn't get eaten. I like left them for the damn little squirrels. Yeah. that didn't exist up there. Like goldfish and like chocolate, like whether it's a Snickers bar or, sometimes I get fancy and you go to the grocery store and they have those like $3 chocolate bars with like pretzels in them. Like that's a snack, whether I'm like a 2-hour river fish or like a backpack hunt. Those two things are pretty much always with me. And then, I mean, if I'm fishing, I'm going to have a beer with me, right? Like some type of hazy IPA typically. Or if I'm feeling cheap, like some Busch Light. but yeah, that's a must fishing. If hunting, I definitely leave the beer at home and I substitute it for some type of something with a little boost, a little caffeine, not necessarily a coffee, but like a noon tablet or like some amino acids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's the go-to.
Yeah. So you're driving, you got that 2-hour drive, your favorite fishing spot. What kind of music are you bumping, or you listen to a podcast or radio or whatever?
Ooh, so I definitely listen to some podcasts. My top podcasts are definitely going to be, either fishing or hunting based podcasts. The Meat Eater guys like Clay Newcomb and the Bear Greased podcast is a really interesting one. It's more of like a storytelling format. So that's a podcast I really like. Cryptocurrency, I'm really trying to make that money so I can go to the Seychelles. So I listen to a fair number of crypto podcasts.
Nice.
Got to get on that train here soon, boys. People are going to be coming on. Now's the time to invest. And then if I'm listening to music, it's going to be Juice World.
Nice. You're headed out the door to do an outdoorsy thing, and let's just say you're in a full out sprint through your house and you have to grab one thing out the door. What are you grabbing?
Oof. That's a tough one. Am I hunting or fishing, or I'm just like going into the woods and this is like a survival item?
Like let's not get too deep. Let's just say let's do fishing. All right, let's keep it basic. What's the first thing you're grabbing out the door?
Bear spray.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm not gonna forget. I mean, Western Montana, dude. I've never had real problems with brown bears other than that one freak incident, but something about grizzlies in the lower 48, they're seemingly just a little scarier for me.
Yeah, a little more aggressive.
Yeah. Yet I really like to fish in the places that they live. So
not a lot of people want to go there.
That's right. There's my favorite particular spot. I typically see more grizz tracks than human tracks.
Nice. So what is something that you wish you knew when you started hunting, fishing, working in the outdoor industry?
Being more patient. I still struggle with patience, but it's just like, I can remember when I moved to Montana, after I'd done, multiple summers of fishing in Alaska, and I was like, oh man, I'm just going to go out there and rope trout. Dude, I got my ass kicked for like a month and a half. Like, it was like, I cannot catch a fish. But it just takes time, especially when you're fishing dynamic pieces of water. Like, rivers change by the day, if they're dropping water, if they're adding water, what bugs are hatching. And, and I'm kind of a snob. I hate nymph fishing, probably because I suck at it. But I hate it. And so, like, if there's not dries to be thrown, I'm just hucking a streamer. And maybe that's definitely part of my problem. But just have the patience to figure it out. Like don't get frustrated, don't get flustered. I mean, as Keaton was talking about, like with his turkey stories, like everything in hunting and fishing is going to be frustrating when you're starting out. You're not going to be successful. You're going to be eating dirt, but like, that's the beauty of it. And then, like, when you finally do figure it out and it finally clicks, it's like one of the best feelings of overcoming these trials and tribulations and all these hours spent trying to, accomplish whatever it was, whether that's, catching your first brown trout or shooting your first turkey. It's just an incredibly rewarding endeavor.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
You learn from your failures.
Oh, and if you don't fail, like, I don't know what you're doing. You're either really good or you're not doing it very much.
Absolutely.
And try to fail fast. Like, try not to repeat the same mistakes over and over. Like, as stupid as it seems, like, analyze like what you did that day. Like, okay, you didn't see a deer. Pull up the map and look where you hunted that day. Like, look what you walked through. That might be why you didn't see any deer. If it was all just monotonous ponderosa pine trees, no shit, you didn't see any deer. Like, find some habitat diversity in a creek bottom and walk through that instead next time. Or, like, actually go home and think about, like, okay, why was today good? Or why did today suck?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. All right. Well, we had like one more, but you kind of covered it on that. So we like to end our podcast with either your favorite outdoor moment, your favorite guide story. It can be funny, it can be, serious, it can be cool. Anything that you really think that stands out to you.
Ooh. Yeah, on it. Well, I'm gonna bring it back to my best guide story was definitely scooping human feces with a coffee can. Like that for whatever reason just rings quintessential Alaska guiding. If you haven't read the book, Alaska Chronicles by Miles Nolte, and you are interested in being a guide or you are a guide, absolute must read. It's an amazing book. But I would say my most memorable moment was on my sheep hunt with my sister and brother-in-law. And like we put this gnarly stalk on this band of rams on our last full day of hunting. And like we crested the hill. And I don't know where the other 8 rams went, but we like popped up on this one ram. And to be a legal ram, it has to be 8 years old or full curl. And so like there's a variety of ways to tell legality. Frankly, they're all really damn hard. But we popped up at about 200 yards on this ram, and he was 7 years old. And so it was just like, it was kind of like the sinking moment of the trip. Like this was our shot to kill a ram, and this ram is 1 year too young. But like, I'll never forget sitting on that knob, just like watching that ram feed for a half hour, just because of the amount of effort, both like in logistics and planning and getting there to like climbing those damn mountains and finding rams. And like, again, I didn't even pull the trigger, didn't even pull the gun up. But like, it was so rewarding to be like, holy shit, like I'm within rifle range of a freaking dall sheet.
Yeah. That's rad.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, awesome. We just want to, from the Young Guides podcast to you, thank you for taking some time out of your day and hopping on with a couple. We're wouldn't say we're like nobodies, but we're not that big in the industry yet. And kind of like what we highlighted here is you just kind of got to get into it and get after it. And if you got a dream, chase it. So we hopped on here. Me and Kyle started out talking to each other, and now we're getting like awesome people like you on our podcast. So we want to thank you, and then anyone who takes time and listens to this podcast, we want to really thank them for taking the hour to 2 hours to listen in and learn about someone and learn about mistakes and victories and everything that we covered through these podcasts. If you're interested in checking out more about Jared, there'll be a little section on our website. You can go there, and we have a picture, and it kind of gives us a little background. You can learn about him and learn about OnX a little more there. So once again, we appreciate you listening and taking the time out of your day. Kyle, you got anything to add?
No, I think this has been a great podcast here with Jared. Jared shared some really great stories on the fishing, the hunting side, and being in the industry. So yeah, Jared, we appreciate you taking your time today to come on.
Absolutely. Yeah, dudes. I appreciate the pillow fluffing compliments and you guys having me on. I'm a nobody as well. Unfortunately, I guess fortunately for me is I get to hunt more than most folks do. So I appreciate you guys seeking some insight here. And frankly, you just go put the hunt app to use, and you'll probably find more critters or more fish that you're after if you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this was another episode of the Young Guides podcast. And once again, I'm Keaton, and
I'm Kyle. I'll catch you on the next one.
Awesome.